Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest, Janeane Bernstein, and she's here today to share with us how to develop resilience in times of crisis. Now, many of you know Janeane. She's been on the show before. She's a writer, on-air personality, voice actress, and researcher. She earned her doctorate from Boston University and received degrees from Syracuse University. In 2011, she started Get the Funk Out radio show, which is heard at UC Irvine after losing her childhood friend. She's always loved writing, learning electric guitar, and other creative pursuits that feed her soul. So let's welcome to the show, Janeane Bernstein.
Thank you so much for having me.
You know, what an honor it is to have you here and to, spend this time and talk with you. And, I'm so just fascinated with your background because I think a lot of people really don't know really much about your story.
Well, before I start, I want to share a quote with you, and I think some people can relate to this. There's a quote a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, used to put on her email signature. It went like this: "It's never too late to be what you might have been." George Eliot. So the reason I'm sharing that with you is because I actually didn't start off in radio years and years ago. I started off in corporate training and development as an instructional designer. My parents thought I was an interior designer. And
Oh boy.
but I was fascinated with radio as a teen. I loved the connection with the DJs in New York. I used to just listen to this one station in particular, WPLJ, and I just loved the feeling of just connecting with the people on air. And I kind of thought maybe one day I'd be a radio host. So flash forward, I was on a project for Hewlett Packard, and I was designing some instruction, and I said, we really need a narrator, and nobody wanted to do it. So I volunteered, and then I thought, I really am so fascinated by voiceover. I think I should take classes, which I did. And then I came out to California and I got an agent, and one thing led to another. And then I met someone who had a radio show, and she said, you can get a radio show. UC Irvine offers free training. So I jumped on that and became a DJ in 2007, hosting a show called Moms Rock the House. And I loved it, 3-hour music show. But then when my friend passed away, the one who had that quote in her email, I was devastated. And I took a year off from radio, and I was in a funk. And I had the idea of, I'd like to go back to radio, but I'd like to have a talk show. And the whole idea of Get the Funk Out show grew from that. It grew from grief. It grew from having a new creative direction and also wanting to have a platform for other people to share their stories.
Well, I can understand why you've had such great success with your show because it's a subject that's touching us all right now.
Oh, yes. More than ever. I would never have imagined.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, how much of us are going through different levels of grief. And a lot of it, your book, Get the Funk Out, was perfect because a lot of people are in kind of a funky place right now,
Well, and it's to be expected. I mean, we've never, ever experienced anything like this. And no one is immune to this. We've got students that didn't have their high school graduations, college students that didn't have graduations, millions of people that have lost their jobs. And that just made me want to pivot and see what I could do to help other people.
So when you decided it was time to write your book, what kind of catapulted you forward with that?
I had the idea in 2012, and I started writing things in a notebook. And then in 2015, my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. So I would fly across the country to Connecticut and then later to Florida where they were moving. And I would carry this notebook, and I started looking at the topic of what is a funk and kind of dissecting it, kind of like a research project, like where does it come from and what are the types of funks and how do we get rid of it and what are the paths we can go down? Well, there's a negative path with negative self-talk and negative behaviors, or there's a positive path. And I had a guest on my show, Carrie Hannon, who's a very well-known writer. And I said, Carrie, I think this could be a book. I said this after my show. She said, I do too. And I ran it by a colleague of hers, and they said, I don't know if people would really want to hear guests from your story and your story sharing stories, about funks. And so I let, unfortunately, one person knock it down. So I just tucked it away, and I would kind of occasionally make notes. Long story short, Carrie came back on my show a few years later. She says, how's the book going? I said, it's not. and
Aw.
she, and she said, why not? And I told her why. She said, no. You have to call my editor, Debbie. So I did, and Debbie loved it. And flash forward, I got a book deal with Post Hill Press, the book was then distributed by Simon & Schuster. And I went full on writing. And within 8 months, I wrote this book, and it came out last year. And then I was never a public speaker, Marianne. And people started asking me, can you come speak to people at the Discovery Science Center or my college students where I'm teaching about self-care and resilience and the science of happiness? And sometimes in life, you may not think of yourself as this person, but other people do. And just say yes. That is my advice. Just say yes and go for it.
When you were doing the research for your book, was there anything that you discovered that surprised you?
Not really. I mean, really that I could have written several books like this because the stories are never ending. And there are themes in the stories. And for instance, I have a background in qualitative research. And so a lot of times with qualitative research, when you're talking to somebody, something will pop up. So you take that idea or that question and you run it by the next person that you speak to, and you see what they say. And then you determine that there's a theme. And so what surprised me was that there are commonalities in the stories, and there are common ways people can have a toolkit for staying resilient, but the stories are just never ending. And sometimes they're jaw dropping of what people go through, and they're just so positive. I had a woman I spoke to yesterday, and she wrote this book called, her name is Linda Olson, by the way. It's a new book. It's a memoir of love, body, and taking back my life called Gone. And she was in Germany, and a train ran over her car, and she lost 3 limbs. And Marianne, she is the most positive person. It was shocking. It's just, in life, especially right now, people are going through the worst things. And sometimes you have to shift your perspective and get out of your own life for a few minutes and go help somebody else or go listen to somebody else. Because those connections to speak to a total stranger are magical right now.
Yeah, it's interesting when we don't know the right words to say. Sometimes just listening is what's needed.
Right. Yes. And you know how we're taught, don't talk to strangers. Well, I'm telling people, go talk to strangers because it's a wonderful thing. It really is, through Zoom or at a safe distance. It's a gift right now.
Yeah, I mean, I know they've got different senior living and assisted and nursing homes that are looking for pen pals,
Right.
because gosh, how difficult has that got to be quarantined in a room. I had a friend go through that recently. He had a surgery, and the hospital sent him to a rehab center, which is kind of like a nursing home in many ways.
Right.
And he was quarantined in a room for 3 weeks, and he would see the physical therapist, and that was it. And so you look
Oh,
at that, it's just like how that works on a person's psyche can really, that's just really tough.
it's awful. I saw somebody post something today. He's a musician, and he's in my book. He goes by California Carl, and he entertains people in retirement homes, and they'll go outside. He has a couple other musicians with him, and they'll perform for the elderly, and the elderly would rather risk getting COVID than die of loneliness.
Yeah. I mean,
That's how they feel.
I
Yeah.
don't, and who's to blame them for that? Because you look at it, it's like, when you're kind of stuck in a room, some of them may have great windows, some may not.
Right.
Just being able to see the outside, I mean, and be in some type of connection with people, I mean, that means a lot.
It sure does. My stepmother lives alone in Florida, and she's lived alone since my dad passed away December 2015. And it's hard. I call her almost every day. And now with COVID, I mean, I haven't seen her since I think January. And I don't know when I'll be getting on a plane. So I just try to do FaceTime. I try to encourage her to go have dinner with a friend, but it's hard because some people have chronic pain, which is what she has, chronic back pain. So it's just being there, calling somebody, there's no texting. You really need to make a connection by phone or FaceTime with people or Zoom.
Well, half the time when people text you anyway, you can't even understand what they're saying. It's like,
yes.
What does this emoji mean?
I know. Or autocorrect if they're doing it, through voice. It's crazy.
You know what? I'm always saying that Suri's, kind of drinking or something because half the time she gets it wrong,
I know. Exactly. There could be a whole comedy stand-up routine on that, couldn't it?
Oh, yeah. They just have to look at my phone,
I know.
So, I mean, when you decide, hey, I'm going to start speaking on these topics, like what were some of the topics that you felt like people really reached out to you about? What was it that really drew people, to asking you to speak more on this?
Sure. Well, initially it was the science of happiness. And that was so fascinating because there's a chapter in my book on the science of happiness. But I decided when I was asked to speak on this that I would bring in at least two people who have PhDs in positive psychology. And we had a wonderful discussion. It was like watching a talk show. And then we had some engaging activities and we finished it up with a chocolate meditation. But the whole idea was to teach people about the research a little bit behind happiness and a concept called flow. And for instance, now's never been a better time to find something to do with your time that you once loved to do or you do love to do, maybe even putting off. So for me, it's guitar. And getting in that flow state is everything. It's a vacation for your mind. It's a great diversion. So I talk a lot about that, finding flow. But there's really four things I talk about. And the first one is gratitude. So what are the people and the things that you're grateful for right now? Because when you really frame that, it helps give you some perspective and it can give you a little boost, actually. I mean, when I think back about who's the person who influenced me the most to write, it was my teacher at 15. And I took the time and I wrote her a letter before she passed away years ago. And I remember getting a response back. And she was so touched and I was so touched. So now's the time to really call or write to someone to thank them and tell them that you appreciate them. And another thing to do is to just take moments to meditate and have these positive or learning moments because we're going through some very, very challenging times. So the first thing is gratitude. The second is thoughtfulness. I focus on for yourself. So really tuning into your mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual health. And then being thoughtful to others. Like we talked about earlier, reaching out to a neighbor, to someone you haven't spoken to, or you know what, maybe you had an argument with somebody, but maybe you could be the bigger person and just call up and say, I'm sorry, or let's move past this because life is so fragile, right? Especially right now.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to take into. I mean, you just are so grateful for life right now.
Yes, exactly. And it's all perspective. So I talk about being, thoughtful to yourself, thoughtful to others, be patient and be kind, do acts of kindness. Obviously we can't go work in a food bank, but we can reach out to people at a safe distance. Maybe a neighbor that lives alone, they're elderly, leave them a note. Do you need anything? Can I go grab some groceries for you? Something, but just tune into someone else's mental, physical, and emotional health. And as we said, talk to strangers because you never know what someone else is going through right now. I've heard stories like, oh, that person cut in line at the grocery store. Well, maybe they're in a rush because they're caring for somebody that's sick, You just don't know.
Yeah, that's the truth. I mean, so many people are just challenged in ways we never thought we would be. And
Right.
things had been so easy up to this point. It's like,
Yes.
instant gratification
Ugh,
was instant,
yes, I
And
know.
now people are having to wait for things. And so I think there's a lesson in patience there somewhere.
There is. And empathy and compassion, because I think I had sent you a message saying, we're in a mental health pandemic. And it was bad before, but now we've gotten walloped and nobody's immune. Kids of all ages are experiencing depression. Adults are going through it, obviously, teachers, everybody. And I want to share one thing because you asked me about my talks, because I think this will really hit home with your listeners. There are actually three things that can affect our happiness. So you have genetics. So let's say my mom had a tendency to be depressed. Well, that can affect me. So genetics, your circumstances that you can't control. Well, here we are, right? And then the choices you make. So those choices, if you make those positive choices with, your mental health, your decision to go exercise, your decision to sit down and play an instrument, something, it's all an equation. So it's never been a better time to really think about your habits and your choices.
Well, yeah, without a doubt. I mean, you look at, everything we do has a consequence and there's a reaction to it. So how can we put some positive, ripples in our pond of what we're all going through right now?
Right. Well, the most important thing, I can't say this enough, is to really focus on taking care of yourself, because if you're not taking care of you, you're not going to feel good and people are going to notice. So the family and friends that are depending on you, or people you connect with, people can tell. I don't know about you, but if I don't get enough sleep, if I don't eat well, et cetera, et cetera. So I have a big list. I can just share a couple of things that these really resonated with people that I give talks to. So self-care. So you've got sleep, as I mentioned. I like having a routine. I don't know about you, but I like getting up and knowing I'm going to get some things done. But the problem with quarantine, Marianne, is that sometimes, I know I have this problem, you can't separate work from your life because it's all in the same place where you sleep. And so you have to kind of, partition your time wisely. And then taking time, maybe you have a dog, go take downtime and take time for yourself, because it's so easy to burn out and to stress because there is so much negativity. But having these outlets to nurture yourself are really important. And I was going to ask you if there's something new you've done during this time, because for me, I learned to grow squash.
You go, girl.
I'm so proud because I was never a gardener. It was like I would grow weeds, and the garden was like a reflection if I was going through a tough time. But I actually took a organic squash, butternut squash, which I love, took the seeds out, put it in my windowsill with dirt. Within a week, I had sprouts. Then I had tall plants. I put it in the garden, and I have grown at least a dozen butternut squash. Can you believe that?
That is so impressive. Good for you. And it's being able to do these unique things
Yeah,
that, we all should maybe know how to do, but never have really taken the time to learn.
exactly. And you know what? It forces me to go outside, to focus on something else other than work and kids and everything else, and to see that I'm creating something, essentially living off the land to some degree.
Yeah, there's a sense of, I don't know, there should be a sense of pride with that, being able to grow your own food in many
Hmm.
ways.
Yeah. And I'll just add to that. I had a neighbor come over one day. He was holding a bag of something, and I didn't quite recognize him at first. I thought he was a solicitor. and and he says, "Hi, I got something for you." And I said, "Oh, Bob, hi. What is it?" He says, "I grew pomegranates, which I love."
Oh, wow.
And I said, "Oh, thank you." He said, "Oh, we have so many. Here's 5." And I said, "Bob, do you like squash?" He says, are you kidding? I love squash. I said, I grew it. And he looked at me and I said, I really grew it. I couldn't believe it. And so having that trade with your neighbor is kind of fun.
Yeah, kind of nice to be able to just share with people around you, and especially in a way that's good for the environment.
Exactly. Yes. The other thing I discovered too is, well, this happened on Mother's Day. My younger daughter said to my husband, Mommy wants a kayak.
Oh
And my
boy.
husband said, what? Wait, what? And she said, oh yeah, she wants a kayak for Mother's Day. So he got me an inflatable one. And I had to figure out, well, where am I going to go use this? And sure enough, we found a place down in Balboa, beautiful place to go kayaking. And I took her, and it's so peaceful and so safe. You know, here we're in the pandemic. It's so safe. It's a beautiful activity, Marianne.
Mm. I used to kayak all the time in Back Bay and Newport Beach.
Oh, so
So
you know.
I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
That's actually, I used to be on the water 5 times a week and loved it, you know?
Yeah, I know.
So
You get it.
you get the different types of exercises and just being out in nature that you can do. I mean, they were just talking about the horseshoe, crabs,
Oh,
and
yeah.
the Back Bay is filled with them, you
Oh, I didn't
know?
know that.
Yeah, so it's nice when you go way far back, you're kayaking, there's probably only 2 feet of water. It's so awesome because you can see all this life beneath you moving around.
It's amazing. And look, it's such a great diversion.
And we all need that right now for sure, you
We
know?
do. We really do.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, I know a lot of people have taken up sourdough. I passed on that,
Yeah.
and I kind of did a little kind of like you did, but I was growing herbs. So, thyme, rosemary,
Yeah.
mint, those kind of things that I can use when I'm cooking as well.
Exactly. I know it's funny. When this first started, I'd say March, April, I heard a lot of parents saying, oh, it's game night, kids. And my kids, after like a couple of weeks, were like, no, it's not. It's not game night. Forget
Well,
it.
yeah, it's interesting. I saw something the other day, post, I think it was on Facebook, saying, all those times that you wanted every day to be Friday, there
Right.
you are.
There you are. It's Groundhog Day. Yeah.
hmm But it's like, what do we do with our Fridays now? What do we do with this time off? Are we, hiking? Are we, and just as you're saying,
Right.
are we doing something that we're giving back to the community, maybe helping out at a food bank, which all those desperately need
Oh,
help.
I know.
People are asking for blood donations right now. So there are lots of different ways to be involved, even if it's, you don't have to be around a lot of people. You could still socially isolate to do that.
I agree. I agree. I did something completely fun and different, although it doesn't really help anybody. I decided to learn how to ride a 3-wheel motorcycle.
Oh my goodness, that sounds like fun.
You know what? It was really fun. And the greatest thing about it was I could not take any phone calls for 4 hours from anybody, family, no one. And it was a complete time for me to focus on me and really concentrate, obviously, because I'm on this very powerful machine. And it was an amazing experience because we don't get those moments of uninterrupted focus in our lives.
Yeah, we're so interrupted, and it seems in some ways even more attached to our devices. I get it. I mean, I just
Yes.
started taking a yoga class with um, the yoga
Nice.
studio I learned how to do yoga at years ago. Just started doing online classes, and they are amazing.
Oh, I love it.
So yeah, so it's nice to be able to do online classes and be a part of, and still be safe.
I agree. I agree. No, it's great. I really have to get back into yoga. I mean, I've got the yoga mat. Sometimes I have every intention and then other things take over. That's the thing. It is really challenging when you know, spend this much time at home to kind of stop and say, okay, I have to walk away from the computer.
Yeah, you have to give it a break. I
Right.
mean, we've been talking so much about things that a person can do for self-care. There's so many different ideas out there. I know you talk on resilience as well. How did that come about?
Well, it first came about because of my own experiences of loss. And I look back to my childhood and I thought, I think I was a pretty resilient kid growing up. I was born in Connecticut and lived in Manhattan, and my mom was single, and I spent a lot of time alone. And I had to go at a very young age, walk to school, and I was staying home alone a lot. And it was a way of life. But I think it really made me a stronger person. And it also made me be okay with, as an adult, being alone, living alone. I lived alone for at least 5 years in Boston years ago. And it's just something that was ingrained in me. But, it's not that I suppress things, but I just learned to fill my time with things that would heal me or make me grow. And so for me, there was a very lonely time in Boston and I was having a very hard time. I joined an all women's gym. I took a pottery class. I kept doing things where I would learn something. And then eventually I went back to guitar lessons because I kept dreaming I was playing guitar again. And so I took guitar lessons for 9 years and it was the best thing. So I believe strongly that in order to build resilience, you need to work on yourself and nurture yourself. Get to know you, get to know your interests. Maybe you have dreams of always wanting to fill in the blank. Do it, try it. I mean, there's never been a better time. You can learn stuff online. You can order an instrument online. The possibilities are endless, really.
Yeah, just as much as your imagination. And you can do a lot of these things that don't cost a lot of money. There's so
Exactly.
much to do in our backyard,
Yes.
and if someone, and I'm using that figuratively, I mean, not
Right.
everyone has actually a backyard, but there's so much to do locally that can
Right.
be either in walking distance or something they can do, remotely at home, like how I'm doing yoga. And they've got yoga
Yes.
classes online on YouTube, and they've got all these different things that you can take to be a part of.
Right. The other thing I'll share too is that I love to write other things besides, short stories and the type of book that I wrote, which is nonfiction. I really love to write screenplays. So during COVID, I came up with some ideas for short scripts. I had just made notes in a notebook and wrote down brief ideas. And then I thought, I got to flush this out. This is really nagging at me. I can really envision this. So for people that are listening that are writers that they thought about doing scripts, I switched from writing a feature script to writing a short script. And my script is a semifinalist in a film festival. And I
Oh,
wrote a pilot.
congratulations.
Thank you. So again, it was a dream, it was an idea. Do it. Just throw it out. You don't even have to tell anybody if you think it's a lunatic idea. Just write the script and go for it. If you believe in something passionately, people will get that. And I was really passionate about these ideas I had for scripts, and it filled my time.
That's absolutely, I love that because the thing it's so interesting, they're looking for great, crazy ideas right now. No one
Right.
wants normal.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Well, hey,
Uh,
congratulations. That is
Thank you.
such an accomplishment. My goodness.
I have a very crazy imagination. And what I would suggest to people is look around you. I mean, you're probably living with a whole cast of characters. I'm not saying write a script and, make fun of your family, but think about the things you see, the things you observe in life, and let your imagination run with the possibilities because there's endless new ideas out there. You just have to run with one.
Yeah, there's so many great things to do. And, to kind of circle back around, at the beginning of this conversation, we talked about how we're going through this mental health pandemic right now, along with
Yes.
COVID.
Right.
How is your book helping people to kind of navigate through that?
Sure. Well, I think, first of all, my book includes stories of my own life. And then, having lost my friend years ago, end of 2010, and then how I navigated that. And, grief is very personal. I always tell people there's no time frame. Someone can't come over to you and say, okay, that's it. Time's up. You've grieved long enough. You just need to take small steps every day. And I highly suggest, having a therapist, speaking to someone, but also filling your days with things that have meaning that would be great diversions, because creating optimism and positivity is essential for building resilience and healing, really. And so there's that. And then there's 24 people from my radio show in the book, all different ages. One woman, Cindy Charlton, lost limbs when she discovered she had the flesh-eating bacteria. And she went on to become a motivational speaker, and she was training to be in the Paralympics. And she's the most positive person I've ever met.
What a great story that is. I mean, because no matter what life throws you, all we have is our mental attitude.
Right. Yes. And it's interesting. I have kids, and I'll say to them, if somebody says something to you that affects you negatively, only you can internalize that and feel bad about that. And I'm guilty of this too. So years ago, someone said to me, "Oh, you're so fat." So I said to myself, "I'm so fat." But if somebody were to say that to me, you could just ignore it, walk away. Don't internalize that, because people have their own issues. They have their own baggage. There are so many critics in the world. I call it like the American Idol mentality, where it's very easy for people to criticize other people when they haven't taken that chance or done that challenging thing, but you have.
Yeah. I mean, you really have to take risks and not really pay attention to what other people are saying in a negative stance. Just like, initially with your book, you had that one person say something negative, and your book is helping so many people now.
Right. Yeah. It's so interesting because it's so timely, and I never would have imagined, obviously, a pandemic, but because there's really content for all different ages. I mean, in the back, I share brief stories about people that are in their 90s, competing in marathons, and they're weightlifters and long distance runners, and they have this very positive outlook on life. So obviously we all hit these road bumps where we get down, and right now we have every right to feel down. And I say, don't ignore those feelings. You want to cry. You want to yell. Close your windows, put your pets outside, but get it out. Get those emotions out, because we're entitled to feel every feeling right now, because this is so strange. It's like a bad movie.
So, we also talked about the science of happiness. I know that you give live and viral talks in regards to that. Could you share how happiness is affected by three things that people really don't realize?
Sure. So I had mentioned briefly earlier how there's been a lot of research about this, and there's a researcher at University of California, Riverside, Sonia Lyubomirsky, and she did research on this years ago. And now the data shows that the percentages aren't they change, they vary based on different studies. But the bottom line is this: that our happiness is affected by our genetics, our life choices, and our life circumstances. So right now, being in a pandemic, some people are not so happy, and that's understandable, because look where we are. Also, the choices you make. I remember being really sad when my friend died, and saying to myself, I'm going to go exercise. I'm going to exercise every day. And I pushed myself to the point of injury, which then led to frozen shoulder and almost surgery. And it took me a long time to realize that my emotional pain was causing me physical pain, because I had a lot of emotional pain. So the choices you make in a time of grief, of tragedy, of uncertainty are so important. And we need to teach that to our kids, to our friends, to everybody, because it's everything.
Yeah, I think they say don't make any major changes during a time of grief, any major decisions.
Right.
Just because we're so emotionally charged, there's so much going on that we may not really be thinking as clearly as maybe we'd like to.
Right. I know I felt like a detective when my friend died, because I wanted to know who were all the people in her life at the time. Who were her fiancés? Who was she living with? What was she going through? And the more people I spoke to, I realized that those people didn't really love her unconditionally. It was mind-blowing, Marianne. I interviewed, I say interviewed, but it really was like an interview. I spoke to a boyfriend, a couple fiancés. One said something about her weight, and I thought, who cares
Wow.
what my friend weighed? Yeah, and I just, you really learn a lot when you speak to somebody. Um, and so I then realized later on that my friend perhaps suffered from mental health issues, but also from the choices she made, the relationships she was in, and all the people, the whole cast and crew that were part of her life. And I thought she was okay, but she was far from okay. Yeah.
Well, Dina, I think we're at this period of time where talking about mental health has never been more on the forefront as it is now. There's always been these stigmas in regards to talking about mental health. And, we have more people suffering from depression now more than ever.
Right. I read an article back in February, March saying that we were in a mental health pandemic and that people, let's say, I would say millennials, they didn't have a problem going up to their boss and saying, you know what, I need a mental health day. Older people, on the other hand, would never say that because they did not feel comfortable saying that. They would just suck it up and go to work. But I believe more than ever that people do need mental health days. It's essential, and you should never feel there's a stigma to that. I mean, if you do, you're not working for the right company or with the right person, because people do need to take a breather and take a break. And there is a lot of toxic people in this world. And if you know that there are toxic people in your house, it's time to clean house. There's a woman who's on my show, and she's in the book. She was a coach for UCLA softball, Sue Enquist. And I watched her TED Talk and I met her. And she said very loudly that toxic people will suck the life out of you. And you will bring those toxic people into your car in a conversation and you will feel your skin crawl. People might bring toxic people in a conversation at your dinner table. They don't belong there. And so you have to be very aware of the people that can affect you physically, mentally, emotionally, because we can't have that. We need to stay strong right now.
Do you think part of that also is taking responsibility and not talking or allowing that feelings or emotions of toxic people to come into your space? If we're at home over the dinner table talking about a really nasty boss, I mean, these
Yeah,
people then are kind of like living rent free in our head.
right. So let's say you have kids. I don't think you should be talking about your toxic boss at the table. I remember my dad, he was a very aggressive driver, and he was always like riding up to the back of somebody's car on the Merritt Parkway in Connecticut, and he would be swearing, and I'd be hanging on for dear life. And that was not that was not good. Good modeling, and aggression is a terrible thing. You just don't want to have those kind of conversations. It's not good for you. If you have like anger issues, you need to go do something about that. I mean, we all get riled up from people. It happens a lot. But go take a walk, go let off steam, but it doesn't really belong at our dinner table. It doesn't belong in the bedroom. It's, if you stop and think about it, it's really unhealthy.
Yeah. And then not only that, but a lot of times, young people pick that up as an acceptable behavior to then, emulate as they go throughout their day.
Yeah, I remember years ago when I was living in Boston, socializing with somebody, and they they thought I was critical, maybe because I didn't think somebody was attractive. Maybe I was snobby because I didn't find that person attractive. And then they went and spoke about me to somebody else, and I immediately said to myself, I don't need, that's not a friend. I cannot have that kind of person saying one thing to my face and then talking about me behind my back. And that's immature, and that's not good. I'd rather be alone. And I've made the choice throughout my life to clean house of certain people because that was so unhealthy.
Well, good for you. And I think sometimes for people, that's a tough thing to do, but you need to take assessment of who you're spending time with.
Yeah,
If it's somebody that's really, I mean, with friends like that, who needs enemies, right? So if you got a person
exactly.
like that in your life, that's like, what am I doing? You have to really assess that.
Right. And it's something to teach your kids too, because if they're always spending time with this one person and that person is critical of other kids, that doesn't feel good. That's not a positive person to have in their life, you know? It's no different than this person is doing drugs, drinking, sleeping around, whatever, fill in the blank. It's just not, it doesn't work. It doesn't work long term at all.
Yeah, it's just not sustainable. When I know we've got so many people out there right now that are suffering just personally, professionally, even through their education. What advice do you have for these people?
Well, it's interesting you're asking this because back in April, I came up with the idea of this new series called Outside the Box because here I was doing the talks about self-care and resilience. I thought that's nice. I mean, that's great. But what about the 40 million people out of work? How could I use my skill sets and my interests in helping people? What could I do? So I started interviewing people, experts in different industries who would share advice about how to find work remotely or how to pivot and start a new venture. A lot of people are starting new businesses. But lately, I opened it up to creating a mentoring series for students who lost their internships, who lost their, work opportunities, graduating from college, because I thought this is the future. What about them? So I wanted to create a sense of optimism where it doesn't feel so optimistic. So I'm kicking off very shortly, as a matter of fact, a series of panels with different schools. And my high school is one of them in Connecticut. And we're aligning high school students with businesses who are offering internships, COVID safe internships, but also students that are graduating high school who perhaps want to talk to college students that are, older, not freshmen. And then students who want to explore different careers and seeing what these people in different industries have to say about what advice would they give right now if they were in their shoes. I actually had mentored somebody who is a junior. He was a junior at the time at Syracuse, and he lost his summer internship. He was really devastated. This was March. So we spoke to her over an hour and we're brainstorming. And I said, well, what if you contact our school and also Syracuse and see if they'll offer you a summer job? And he got both jobs. Both jobs. That's mind
It's
blowing.
amazing. It's just
Right.
amazing.
But think about it. Wouldn't you want someone to talk to you and listen to you and bounce ideas off of if you were in their shoes? Because that's what people need right now. So I'm so excited, Marianne, to launch this because we need some positivity right now. In some of the talks I've given, some parents have said, oh, my son, he's in his room all day. He's on Zoom, but he's depressed and he really won't do much. And sure, he's depressed. There's not much to do. At the time here, the beaches were closed and there wasn't really anything to do, and people didn't want their kids going out. So, any way that we can help one another build positivity and opportunity is amazing.
Yeah, it's just a way to give each other a hand up because that's something
Right.
that we all need right now.
We do. We really do. And, it would be great if we all knew when this will be over, but we don't know. So all we can do is try to connect people and stay positive and think, as I say, outside the box, think differently into, okay, it's not where you want it to be, but what's something else you could do? And maybe that something else will be even better for you.
If people are struggling for a way to kind of find ideas, what would you suggest that they do?
Um, There are, you know what, I've got some free handouts and I could email them to people, but I've got a list of resources. Like, for instance, there's Berkeley, UC Berkeley offers a website. I think it's called The Greater Good. And I love that. And for anybody who's a teacher, they actually offer an educational component in that. But they have great ideas for parents, for kids, and resources. I would also say read about positive psychology. And here's a great thing I did, Marianne. I think it was February or March, I would take my walks, but I had enrolled in a class called The Science of Wellbeing with Dr. Laurie Santos of Yale.
Oh,
And
yes.
if you go, okay, so if you go on Coursera and you enroll, over 2 million people can't be wrong because so many millions of people have taken this course and it's free. So you go to Coursera, you enroll in the Science of Wellbeing. And when I would take my walks, typically, I would watch her lectures. I would interact with the content. I actually met people on the Facebook group who became my friends. There's a huge Facebook group devoted to this class. And it is such an uplifting thing. I would suggest that to anyone listening right now is to take this class. It is fantastic. And you can get a certificate. You have to pay for the certificate, but that will be stamped, Yale, you took this course, and that's really nice to have. But other than that, you can take it for free, and it's such a boost.
How empowering is that? And I know also your book is a great resource for people that are just looking to make shifts as well.
Right. I like I said, it's very, very timely, and I would recommend it just for the amazing stories, the different people in it. I mean, there's one woman I think she's 88 now, Jackie Krischer. When I met her, she was featured in a film because she became a triathlete in her 80s. And her husband at the time in her 70s says, "Oh, you don't need to do all this exercise." And she really wanted to become more athletic. And unfortunately, he passed away, and she enrolled in these fitness classes, which led to swimming and biking and running. And the last I heard, she was training to hike Mount Kilimanjaro.
Good for her. I love that.
Yes, exactly. So on those days where we can't get off our sofas, we have Jackie.
Jackie's motivating us to move forward. I love it.
You like Jackie.
Well, I know you have all sorts of great resources on your website. And where can our listeners kind of connect with you and learn more about your great stuff?
Well, if they go to my website, and I'll spell it for you, it's Janeane Bernstein, JaneaneBernstein.com. I have all of my, my series, my interviews up there. And if they leave their email, I can send them the free resources. I have this great set of reading material, and I'm finishing up the ebook. There's another version of that coming out as well.
Oh my goodness, I can't wait to get my hands on that. That sounds exciting. Well, my goodness, Janeane, we could talk all day. I just love your work and all the positive things you're doing. So no, thank you. I mean, we've been able to spend some great time just kind of a little bit diving in, but I know our listeners are going to want to connect with you personally to learn more.
That would be great. And if you're ever back in California, let's go kayaking.
Oh, we're totally going to do that. Well, Janeane, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you, Marianne. It's been great.
Well, thank you, Janeane. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you. If you'd like to learn more about Janeane and her book, Get the Funk Out, you can at JaneaneBernstein.com for more information. Her book, Get the Funk Out, is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, ask for them to order it. And of course, it's available on Kindle. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.